So eventually there became a need to go back and think of old technologies. For the gut, tissue bath was obvious. We've got the, indeed I saw a slide on this just yesterday or the day before, somebody else was showing it. We have the largest source of living neuronal tissue in the gut, living neuronal human tissue. So we set all this back up again, and we used it in industry, and back at university I thought, this is a way of producing a useful lab. So we set this up, and now the lab is funded a lot from industry who want this kind of technology. Yeah, so we have this technology, and but a big question with using human tissue is that, of course, you can pick up a specimen from, don't forget all this work is anonymized. We actually do know the name, but we blank all of that name, all of that detail out. We certainly don't know the personal life of that person, so we could have a nun, and I think we actually did have one once, or we could have a drug addict who had lived a hard life, and we don't know that. We do know if they're male and they're female, we do know their age, we do know their disease, but a lot of, we don't know if they're vegetarian, we don't know if they drank heavily. All these things, for example, could affect the response. So it's a criticism leveled at us a lot, is that we can't do proper science with human tissue because our variability is so great. I would counter that in two ways. One is, okay, let's take the criticism on the chin, let's collect every phenotype about that patient that we can, so that we can spot the outliers and we can make sense. And that's what we do. I think the last paper we published, we had about 10 pages of supplementary data just to show, look, we do know these patients, it's not random. I would counter it in a second way, and that is the common laboratory species, the mouse, is so inbred, so restricted. There was a lovely paper out about 8 years ago, I've forgotten, in Nature, where people at the Sanger Institute had genotyped common laboratory mice, and there were only about 5, if I remember rightly, about 5 variants, and those 5 variants had given rise to all the mice used in molecular knockouts. And if you go through and analyze that, you find so many SNPs and variations that it makes human tissue work look easy. There's so many. But in common, people will be using single strains. Now, I know of many examples where people will get a result with one strain from one supplier, but fail to get the same result from the same strain from a different supplier. I work in an area where a receptor I studied does not exist in a functional state within mice, and yet in other countries they get responses to activation of that receptor. Why is that? Possibly different countries, breeding stations, inbreeding, creating different animals. So I counter the criticism of human studies in those ways. But I have to admit that there are ways of moving forward, and that's human tissue engineering, where we start isolating these cells, understanding them and putting them back together to create organs on chips and organoid models where we put 2 human cells together to ask particular questions. We can do that because we have a ready supply of native tissues, so we can extract and culture them for short periods of time so they don't change their phenotype too much, and put together to ask questions. I think that's probably the way forward. So even where I am now, I suspect is going to be not quite redundant as a technique, but used purely as a validated check for what's to come, and that will be human tissue engineering.